One day, 12 hours, more than 22,000 casualties. Here at Antietam National Battlefield near Sharpsburg, Maryland, the Civil War reached one of its most brutal turning points. September 17, 1862 would become the bloodiest single day in American history. But Antietam was more than a slaughter. It was the battle that stopped Robert E. Lee's first invasion of the North, handed Abraham Lincoln the opportunity he had been waiting for, and helped change the war from a fight to preserve the Union into a fight that would also strike at slavery itself. Today we're walking the ground where that happened, from the Cornfield to the sunken road to Burnside's Bridge, to tell the story of the day the war changed. By late summer 1862, the Confederacy had reason to feel bold. General Robert E. Lee had just won a major victory at Second Bull Run, and with that momentum behind him, he led the Army of Northern Virginia across the Potomac and into Maryland. His hopes were practical and political at the same time: feed his army from northern farmland, influence public opinion in the North, encourage Maryland's sympathy for the Confederacy, and possibly convince European powers like Britain or France to recognize the South. Standing against him was Major General George B. McClellan and the Army of the Potomac. McClellan was beloved by many of his men and skilled at organizing a fighting force, but he was also notoriously cautious. Then came one of the strangest twists of the entire war. Union soldiers found a copy of Lee's Special Orders number 191 wrapped around cigars in a field. The so-called Lost Order revealed that Lee had divided his army. It was an extraordinary opportunity. But McClellan hesitated. That delay gave Lee time to pull his scattered forces back together near Sharpsburg, using Antietam Creek as a defensive line. When the armies finally collided on September 17th, Lee's men were badly outnumbered, but they were in position, and they were ready to fight. The battle opened at dawn on the north end of the field, around the Miller Farm and its now famous 24-acre cornfield. Union troops under Joseph Hooker slammed into Confederate forces under Stonewall Jackson in a fight so fierce that the corn was cut down like it had been harvested by steel. Visibility vanished in the smoke. Units surged forward, fell back, and surged again. The ground changed hands repeatedly, and men disappeared into the stalks only to emerge as casualties, or not emerge at all. Reinforcements poured in, including men under General Joseph Mansfield, who was mortally wounded that morning. Hooker himself was also wounded and carried from the field. What followed in the nearby West Woods was even more catastrophic. Union troops under John Sedgwick advanced too far, too fast, and were hit from multiple sides in a devastating Confederate counterattack. In roughly 20 minutes, Sedgwick's division suffered around 2,200 casualties. By mid-morning, the northern end of Antietam had become a killing ground. The battle had barely begun, and already the cost was staggering. As the fighting in the North lost momentum, attention shifted to the center of the Confederate line. There, a worn farm road had been carved down over time by wagon wheels, creating a natural trench. During the battle, it became one of the deadliest places on the field, the sunken road, later remembered as Bloody Lane. Union assaults battered the position for hours. Confederate troops under D.H. Hill used the road as cover and repelled attack after attack. Then the tide turned. Union soldiers reached high ground that let them fire down into the lane, and confusion in the Confederate ranks helped break the position. Once the line collapsed, the road was left packed with the dead and dying. The Confederate center had cracked open, and for a moment it looked like Lee's army might be destroyed then and there. But that moment slipped away. McClellan failed to press the advantage decisively, and another chance to shatter Lee's army disappeared into the smoke. If you love haunted ground, hard history, and the stories places still carry long after the cannon smoke fades, make sure you subscribe and come ride these back roads with us. There's always more waiting just beyond the next marker. The battle's final major phase unfolded to the south, where Major General Ambrose Burnside was ordered to cross Antietam Creek and roll up the Confederate right. The problem was that instead of forcing multiple crossings, Burnside focused on one narrow stone bridge, the structure we now know as Burnside's Bridge, though it was called the Rohrbach Bridge at the time. A small number of Confederate defenders held the high ground above it and turned the crossing into a deadly bottleneck. For hours, Union troops were shot back from the bridge. At last, in the early afternoon, Federal soldiers pushed across and captured it, but the delay had cost them dearly. When Burnside finally began advancing toward Sharpsburg, Lee's army seemed dangerously close to collapse. Then A.P. Hill arrived from Harper's Ferry after a hard-forced march and struck Burnside's exposed flank. The sudden Confederate counterattack drove the Union advance back and saved Lee's army from disaster. By sunset, the battle was over. When the guns finally fell silent, the fields around Sharpsburg were covered in the wreckage of a single terrible day. More than 22,700 men had been killed, wounded, or listed as missing. No other single day in American history has matched Antietam's toll. And yet, even after all that, the battle ended without total destruction for either side. Lee's army remained in place on September 18th, still daring McClellan to attack. McClellan did not. That night, Lee withdrew back across the Potomac into Virginia. For President Lincoln, the result was frustrating, but it was enough. Tactically, Antietam was inconclusive. Strategically, it was a Union victory. Lee's invasion of the North had been stopped, and that mattered far beyond Maryland. 5 days later, on September 22, 1862, Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that enslaved people in states still in rebellion would be free as of January 1, 1863. Antietam gave him the opening to do it. That means Antietam's legacy is larger than troop movements and casualty figures. This was not the day the war ended, but it was one of the days the war changed. Here, on these fields, the struggle over Union, freedom, and the future of the country turned a corner, at a terrible price. Standing here today, it's almost impossible to imagine the noise this place once held. When we visited Antietam back in 2015, my son and I actually watched a cannon firing demonstration here at the park. Even knowing it was only a demonstration and only using half the powder, the sound still rolled across the fields like thunder. My son was a little nervous at first. He covered his ears for the first couple of shots, then finally left them uncovered for the last one. By the end of it, he thought the whole thing was incredible. And standing there listening to that cannon echo across the battlefield, it was one of those moments where the history stops feeling like something in a book. For just a second, you can almost feel what this place must have sounded like on September 17, 1862. Of course, the real battle would have been far louder, far more chaotic, and far more terrifying than anything a demonstration could recreate. But it's a powerful reminder that every quiet field here once witnessed one of the most violent days in American history. If you enjoy exploring places where history still lingers in the landscape, make sure you subscribe and come along for the journey, because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't just found in textbooks. They're waiting out here on the back roads.